Good evening. Is it time for British Columbia at long last to have a citizens review committee to handle complaints against the police? We'll tackle that one tonight, but first here's Steve with a rundown.
The boom is long gone in BC's mining industry, but what about the future? Can we regain a competitive spot in the international marketplace? The Mining Association has formed a task force to find out. Its president, Tom Waterland, is coming up with Webster. The case of the missing and recovered emerald ring has now led to charges against a former Vancouver police officer. That following a review of the case ordered by BC's Attorney General, Brian Smith.
There not only was not a cover-up, but I can tell you that the police recommended a prosecution in this case. I'm happy to say that.
And Brian Smith is in the studio now with Webster.
And Webster's first question is not on the laying of any charges against any particular person, but I hope it's pointed enough. Is it not a fact, Attorney General, Mr. Smith, that you would agree with me that there was an appearance of taint, T-A-I-N-T, and that the most ordinary, most reasonable person could well say, after seeing the detailed reporting done by BCTV, that it looked like there might be a cover-up?
Didn't look right.
Looked like there might be a cover-up.
Well, those are your words. No, it didn't look right, and the public were entitled to know why. There was no charges laid, no investigation carried on in public. Police board, police commission weren't dealing with it. It raised a lot of questions.
Second question. Had it not been for the detailed reporting by BCTV, including the incident about monies being paid back, had it not been for that, is it not likely there would not have been a review?
Well, probably not at that time with that speed, because it was the media coverage that brought it to my attention. And the first time I learned of this case in anything but the most fleeting detail was when I watched on TV.
BCTV?
Yes, I'll give that plug.
John Daly.
I'll acknowledge that plug. It was a good story. And I watched the interview of the owner, and I immediately then launched a review and had my assistant deputy criminal justice go over the whole thing, interview people afresh, and I read the summaries of the file, my deputy read the summaries of the file, and we all came to the identical conclusion, and that was that criminal charges had to be laid.
So somebody made an honest error of judgment prior to that time?
I think that's fair to say.
Is it fair to ask you this question? Was the investigation by the police as complete as the report done by BCTV about the sending back of the money? In other words...
Well, it's not as dramatic. I mean, you have the advantage of this media. The police have to write long, dry reports that don't hit you on the head and grab you in your living room. But the police did a full investigation, and they recommended that charges be laid. And charges were not laid. And they weren't laid because anything improper was done, or because anyone was protecting anyone, or because anyone was covering up. It was simply the judgment of the person that charges in these circumstances should not be laid. With that judgment, I didn't concur, the Deputy Attorney General didn't concur. In fact, the prosecutor that's handling the case, Mr. Peck, also believes that the charge should go forward. So we all disagree, but we had the advantage, let's be fair, of having seen a dramatic portrayal of what went on, the owner's own story given, more details came out as it went along, and also we had the advantage of additional interviews and additional evidence being looked at, which the prosecutor the first time didn't have.
See, fair enough. You see, where reporters sometimes tend to be perhaps take an overly critical look at the actions of the police, is that where any policeman is involved and there is an investigation, and then there are internal proceedings coming up and the policeman quits the force, and the police have to drop their internal discipline, and there is no charge,
Right.
naturally eyebrows go up among reporters. Is that what leads you to believe that you will amend the BC Police Act?
Well, it sure had an influence. I've wanted to make some changes to it for some time, and I'm going to propose two areas of change. One area of change, the most important one, is that we'll have a citizens review committee under the BC Police Commission that you can complain to as a citizen. If Jack Webster, citizen, not Jack Webster, investigative journalist, but Jack Webster, citizen, wants to complain about bad police tactics in Salt Spring Island, and so he goes to a citizens review committee of the Police Commission, and they launch an independent investigation, and then you don't have the detachment of the RCMP in the Gulf Islands investigating itself. You don't have the City of Vancouver force investigating itself. You have that satisfaction of knowing that there's going to be an independent look at what the police did. That, in my opinion, is better. It is a better perception, and it's better for the police. It protects the police, because then people aren't always going to be pointing false fingers at them and saying, hey, you guys are doing some sort of cover-up. There's going to be an independent look at it. So it's better all around. That's the first change. The second change is going to be that we want to give greater investigative powers to the BC Police Commission so that they can look into and hold hearings that involve ex-policemen, not just current members of the force. So you can't resign, and that's the end of it. They can investigate an ex-policeman's conduct, and also they would have stronger powers of subpoena and conducting a hearing. We've had problems with the Jacobson case, trying to get that case before the inquiry, and we haven't been able to do so because of legal delays and the same sort of thing that happened with the Nellis inquest in Toronto. The public can't get the story and can't get the truth because of all these delays and legal finagling. And I'm trying to cut through that and to have a process that lets the public see what's going on, but also one that's fair to somebody that's under accusation. It's got to be fair to that person.
At the moment, if I make a complaint against a police officer in any circumstances whatsoever, what happens? I go to the local police commission and I make a complaint, and they investigate it and give me a yea or a nay or by your leave. Is that correct?
The local force will get a report to the local police board. The chief will be responsible for that, and he'll report to the local police board, and you will get an answer. Now, if there isn't a local police board, if you're in an RCMP policed area, then it will be done through the RCM police.
In the case of Vancouver City Police just now, though, where we have a police commission of a kind, the local police board, the complaint can't be investigated by them because, as I recall, Harcourt saying he might have had to sit in a quasi-judicial capacity after the investigation of this particular officer.
The police investigate it. In this case, there was a complaint made to the police board, as I understand it, by the owner, and they were going to have a hearing into this matter.
And the man quit.
And then the man quit, and that board had no more power to have such a hearing.
This would be a new board you're talking about.
It would be built under the BC Police Commission, which is there. We're not going to have another fourth level of bureaucracy dealing with police. We're going to take the BC Police Commission, we're going to use that. It's an independent
And it would
vehicle.
only be for complaints against police officers.
Yes.
You might get, scores of them a year. It might drive you crazy with, because you know many of the complaints against police are what you might call kind of loosely based.
Well, I know, but some of them may be very serious, and it would be for this independent body to decide, and if it's a frivolous complaint, they can deal with it fairly swiftly, and if it's a serious complaint, they can give an independent, fresh look at it. Then
Okay.
the public's protected.
Do you think you'll be able to bring in this amendment to the Police Acts to allow the Citizens Complaint Board or Review Board in the next session of the legislature?
That is what I am going to recommend to my colleagues, that it come in the next sitting of the legislature in 1987.
More with the Attorney General, Brian Smith, freshly returned to office after a magnificent victory in the election, I've no doubt, after the break. You've been commissioned by a new Premier to have conflict of interest guidelines ready by the end of the year. Because Mr. Van der Zalm is very sensitive about his own conflict of interest, and as you know, he quit being Minister of Finance on those very grounds. Are you all set to go with legislation on conflict of interest which will make everybody clean and perfect?
Our assignment will be carried out in time, I can assure you, be ready well before the end of the year and be submitted to Cabinet. And
Found any good ones yet?
well, there are lots of good ones, and I can tell you that there are a lot of very silly, unworkable ones too, that have been designed by man to produce nothing but bureaucratic nightmares and tangles of paper, and wouldn't work for anyone in this world except somebody who has nothing.
Fine. Next. I am now lobbying on behalf of Eddie Haymore, the famous man from Rattlesnake Island, about whom a judge of the Supreme Court said he had been the victim of a most horrendous conspiracy emanating from the Premier's office and naming a number of departments. He got $200,000 kind of cumulative award, but he cannot sue for punitive damages. Are you planning to give him an ex gratia payment in settlement of that legal defect?
Well, I read Mr. Hamer's decision, the decision of
The judge.
Mr. Justice McKinnon. And Jack, you cannot help but feel very sorry for this man. I mean, it is one of those dreadful cases of the state screwing somebody around.
Right.
And I say the state, I mean the state collectively, provincially, regionally, and locally. And he was put through a terrible ordeal. And I'm glad that the matter came to a court decision, and I'm glad for him also that he received some recognition and also that he will be receiving some money. Whether we're able to do anything more or not for him, I think we'll have to await the outcome of these two appeals. They're still pending and they're still before the court. But I have a great deal of sympathy for what he went through. I think he's a genuine case of a little guy getting pushed around.
Yeah, but he's claiming a kind of ex gratia payment because
Yeah.
of the Crime Procedure Act of 1974.
Well, as I understand, though, that his claim for punitive damages was rejected by the court, not just on technical grounds, but it was rejected in a very careful court decision. But I have promised to review the matter, and when the appeals are exhausted, I certainly will do so.
Good. When Paul Watson gloated about the sinking of half of Iceland's whaling fleet, you called it sabotage. Are you planning any charges under the Canadian law against Paul Watson of the Sea Shepherd Society?
Well, you can't lay a charge unless you have evidence, no matter how angry you are at what someone says or does. And I must admit to having been greatly offended to hear a Canadian citizen sitting here under the sanctity and safety of our laws and our democratic institutions and bragging about sinking vessels unlawfully in another country. There is a provision in our criminal code which makes it an offense for you or I to engage in a conspiracy to commit a crime in another country, which, if it were committed in this country, would be a crime. But what you have to prove is that some act, some overt act towards that conspiracy actually took place in British Columbia. And I can tell you that we are seriously, through the police forces of this land, trying to find evidence of such an act. And if we can, we will charge him. That's a much better thing to do than to go through extradition. Extradition takes forever. Extradition makes international extradition lawyers
Fair
rich.
enough. Fair enough. You still have to watch and scalp if you can get evidence. Go ahead, please.
Darn right.
Yes, good evening.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that I am in favor totally for independent review panels. When I went through Simon Fraser through the criminology department before I joined the police force, the big joke of the day was that not to get stuck in an elevator with three Vancouver City Police, because you won't be walking out of there, especially when you're in the police cell. And I do believe that we do have to have some type of a review panel because they're not highly looked upon at this time.
So you're a kind of policeman now, are you?
That's right. I'm with the RCMP now.
Well, be careful to whom you say the remarks about three Vancouver City Police and not being able to walk out of the elevator. Thank you, sir. We'll take the next call. Go ahead from Salmon Arm.
Yes, sir. Mr. Smith, just a question in relation to a comment you made on the portion of the program regarding possible disciplinary actions in relation to police officers who are engaged in criminal activity. You mentioned the case with the surname of Jacobson. Was that, would that have been a Vancouver member you were referring to?
Yes. Yes, that was also a Vancouver case, which we were attempting to investigate under the Inquiries Act and the Police Act, but we have run into legal roadblocks to our right to have that investigation.
You mean court decisions going against you?
Yes. Yes. Well, they're in appeal now, but that's we've had to delay it. We haven't lost the court decision, but we've delayed it pending appeal.
Goes on forever.
Sure.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I don't. On the part of the police officer here, I think that not only is he to set an example for society, but to enforce the law as well. And considering that he is more familiar with the law than society is in general, I think that deterrence on his part should be a lot severe and stronger than anybody else. Because of the fact that he's more familiar with the law, and when he takes chances like that, you know, he's taking a higher risk than I think Joe next door or whoever.
Well, let's just talk about a police officer, not a particular one, but just any police officer. If a charge is made against a police officer, that's very serious, and he probably does pay a higher penalty than another citizen, because if he's found to have done something wrong, his whole credibility as a law enforcement person is shattered. And I think also we have to be very careful not to be too fast to point fingers at policemen. Policemen don't get a lot of thanks in our society. They do very messy work. They take risks. They put their lives in jeopardy every day for us. And so we should be very slow to seriously accuse them. But there are cases where policemen do things wrong, and we know that. And they have to be dealt with fairly and impartially, but the public has to believe that we do deal with those things and we don't cover them up.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Smith, I'd like to ask whether or not you think that the exposure given the Winterton case by BCTV will jeopardize the Crown's ability to successfully prosecute against the charges that have been laid.
Well, I would hope not, but in this day and age of massive media coverage of these things, there's always a danger, I guess, that it could. But juries today are made up not of recluses or people who sit and knit in a corner somewhere and don't read the newspaper or don't watch BCTV. They do. And they make up their own minds on the basis of the evidence they hear in a courtroom. How do you ever find a jury that doesn't watch television or doesn't read a newspaper? They do. But what they must do in a courtroom is they must put that out of their mind or any preconceived ideas they have, and they must deal with the man before them on the basis of what they hear in a court.
No doubt in my mind that BCTV was fully justified in following through on the story with the information they had from the complainant and doing the report they did. And for BCTV not to run it would have been a dereliction of its duty.
That's right.
Good, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Smith, I got three questions. Number one, why did the chief of police didn't hold this constable until the review board or a committee was to find out what he was doing that was wrong? Number two, how are the taxpayers in the Vancouver city going to trust you or the police and city because of this situation? And number three, what happens if there's a case like this happening and it deals with a higher superior above the normal police chief or the constable that was in the wrong?
Well, the last question's a bit hypothetical. What do you want to say to the first two? Why, he said, for instance, why did the chief of police not hold the constable until his inquiries were totally finished?
But you can't stop a person from quitting a job. If you did that, you'd have to restrain them or lock them up or something, and you can't do that.
And as far as trust is concerned, I suppose that would depend on the final outcome of your civilian review panels.
Well, I hope that a civilian panel will increase the trust, because everyone will know that there is an outside body that investigates police, and that it's not just police investigating themselves.
Go ahead from Nanaimo.
Yes, hello. I was wanting to know from Mr. Smith what would be considered frivolous as far as police investigation goes. I happen to be the son of a member of the Vancouver City Police Department, and I'm totally convinced he's been involved with well, 2 murders. And I gave this information to the members in Vancouver when I was residing in Edmonton, and
Well, just a minute, sir. I hesitate to continue with the call like that all the way, but you must have advice for this man, surely, Mr. Attorney General, if he makes such a dangerous allegation.
It would hardly be a frivolous one. It would be a very,
yeah.
very serious one. It would be the opposite from being frivolous. But
I don't know the mental capacity of this man who's phoning me, but to make that kind of charge in an open line indicates something which would make me a little suspicious. I would suggest, sir, you swear out your affidavits and give them to the Attorney General. Wouldn't you, if he's got that kind of information in hand? Swear out an affidavit, give it to the Attorney General, give it to the Commissioner of the RCMP, give it to the Chairman of the BC Police Commission, slip it to somebody in the news business and let them judge whether or not you're out your tree. Thank you very much. I don't know if I handled that right or not. Another section of calls after the break. I didn't mention Indian land claims, knowing how you stand on Indian land claims. There are no plans to negotiate with the Indians on land claims, are there? Our Aboriginal people in BC?
But we have never negotiated Indian land claims, but we do talk to Indian bands about things they want to talk to, including land claims from time to time, and we have attended some meetings with the Nisga'a, but we take the position, I think it's well known that we take the position that...
Very well known.
...that they're not something you can negotiate. They belong to all the people of this province, not to the first citizens of this province, the second citizens, or the third citizens, that all citizens are...
Go ahead to
equal.
Attorney General Brian Smith.
Yes, Mr. Smith. I'm a policeman in one of the large RCMP detachments in the Lower Mainland. We had an incident that happened that was most disturbing. Now, briefly, what it was a gentleman was not happy with the way the police handled his son being arrested. And in turn, he came in and laid a complaint to the RCMP that he was roughed up by the police. Now, through independent statements and the statements the police officers gave, there was enough evidence, or there was enough for a prosecutor's information sheet put forward to the local prosecutor. Now, the local prosecutor reviewed it, and in our opinion, and in the prosecutor's opinion, there was ample information to lay a public mischief charge against this gentleman. Now, the prosecutor felt that we would not go with the charge because it would discourage honest, law-abiding citizens. It would make them scared to come forward to lay legitimate complaints against the police force. And I would like to know your comments on this, because it is not fair to the police officers to be subject to an internal investigation where Crown will not proceed with public mischief charges.
Yeah, that's a most unusual one. That one, I would think that would be the sort of case that the Citizens Review Committee, if that was brought to them by the citizen who had made this complaint, which appears to be a false complaint, that they would dismiss that very summarily. And that would still leave open the question as to whether that person should be charged with mischief or not. But I wouldn't anticipate that that kind of thing would go very far with the Citizens Review Committee, that they would make very short work of that. But I think it's protection to your detachment to have that independent mechanism there.
Now, in the meantime, this officer is obviously unhappy that the fellow who caused the public mischief wasn't charged with public mischief, because the prosecutor thought it would look like a kind of double whammy to a citizen, right or wrong.
Well, that's a very tough judgment call. I mean, I might have a different opinion, but you know, I can't be the prosecutor.
Thank you for your call. Policeman's lot is not a happy one, as somebody once said. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes.
I had the pleasure of spending the night down at the Vancouver jail there, and when I was taken in, I was asked to empty out my pockets, and I did so. And I was leaning on the desk because I had a broken foot, and I started arguing with the police officer that I was in pain, and he likewise took and flicked his hand in my eye. And then my lawyer pursued this, and they denied it, but I like to know how they can deny that when the actual assault is put on camera. Internal Affairs was looking into this. They found nothing wrong, but it's right on film.
Okay, question. Had you been drinking?
Me? Yes, I did. Was.
To how long ago was this?
It's about 3-4 months ago. I blew 1 point over the legal limit.
And how did you break your foot?
Me? I was already in the cast, and they furthered that by going down in the paddy wagon. They're flying around corners, and my foot hit up against the back of the wagon and busted. Again, re-broke the brake that was already there.
You were flying around in the back of the paddy wagon?
Yeah.
You mean a high speed downtown?
Yeah, they really wanted to get me down there quick, and they did. Broken foot and all.
This might be a case for your civilian review panel. Not yet in existence now.
Be the sort of thing that the civilian review panel could look at.
Because they've got videotape. They've got videotape down there at the desk now, don't they? Okay, boy, but you gave it up, did you?
I'm going to pursue this with my lawyer, and you know, like I asked if I could speak to my lawyer, and I had told the lawyer I needed the phone number or the policeman, and the cop says, never mind, I'll make the call for you. And I says, I've got the right to make my own call myself to my counsel.
Sure, but
don't
let's go over everything that happened at the desk that night, because there are occasions when the patience of the most solemn policeman can be tried by the actions of a drunk at the desk.
Well, it's right on camera. It wasn't,
okay,
you know, he put
pursue
his
it and let me know how you get on. From Courtney. Go ahead from Courtney, please.
Hello, Mr. Webster.
Yes, sir.
Love your programs. Mr. Smith, I was wondering, I am a person who has a problem much like Eddie Haymore's, and is it necessary that we have to go through everything Mr. Haymore went through to get the government's attention? I've just, not knowing this program was going to be on tonight, I've called Bob Fullerton, the Ministerial Assistant, again today for the Department of Social Services and Housing, and he said that they're absolutely not going to do anything about it.
Just a minute.
To Al Bazell. I've been down to
just a minute.
Victoria about it. I've gone to the Ombudsman, the Workers' Compensation Board. I wrote Terry Segretti a comprehensive letter. I was accused, after having confrontation with my bosses, the Ministry of Human Resources, accused of being mentally ill and not told.
Hold on. That's one of the dangers. I don't mind letting you talk on endlessly, but you don't make any sense to other people than myself. You have a case against the government for something or other. Have you been to court and have you received any kind of a judgment?
That's what I'm asking, Mr. Smith. Is it necessary to go through the court system before the government will pay any attention to a legitimate case?
Okay.
Well, no, of course it isn't, but I don't know whether he has a legitimate case or not. He feels he does. He's been to the Ombudsman. He's been a number of places.
Compensation Board?
Yeah, I mean, he's had process, but...
Every single doctor that has examined me has said the ministry is absolutely wrong and should retract.
Who is your MLA?
I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but he's newly elected here from Courtney. He's with Education.
Stan Hagen.
Stan
Hagen, yes.
Well, why don't you write him setting out your problem and copy me on that? Do you want to do that?
I'll do that. Thank you
very much.
Thank
this
you.
takes me back to my old days in morning radio when I used to take endless calls and endless calls and endless calls about the injustices real and imagined of those days. But they're still around. If I cut somebody off, it's not because I don't necessarily believe them, but it's because, one, I don't want to go on forever with the same kind of mixed up story. Last call. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd just like to ask the Attorney General one question, please. I just returned from living in New Zealand for quite a few years, where the police officers in New Zealand do not carry guns and walk 2 by 2 through the square and that, and they're the friendliest people you could ever want to ever run into. Whereas here in Canada, I've only been back for a month or so, but the feeling that I get from most of the police and all that, they really, really scare you when you look at them, and they're really heavy-duty looking guys, to the point that I wouldn't want to go up and ask them for directions or whatever.
Fair enough. Do you plan to ask the police in British Columbia to surrender their weapons?
No, I don't. I would hope that many of them aren't as formidable, I don't think, as the caller seems to think in comparison with the policemen of the South Island of New Zealand. They don't have as much crime.
My thanks to the Attorney General Brian Smith of the Government of British Columbia. We shall watch with interest for his amending legislation on how complaints about the police will be handled in the future. My thanks to you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you,
I'll be back after the break. Good news surrounds us in British Columbia. In 1985, the mining industry, both coal and metal, lost $35 million. Employment is down in the mining industry to 15,000, the lowest level since the NDP were in power. And I'm sure that taxes and everything else are higher than they ever were when the NDP was in power. Little smile from my guest. My guest is a former social credit cabinet minister of song and story, Tom Waterland. He used to run agriculture, used to run the forests. And now he's a big noise in the Mining Association, the president. And you're going to impress me with some industry task force you've set up to revitalize a rather crippled mining industry. Is that what you're going to do, Mr. Waterland?
Jack, I'm not going to try to impress you at all.
You must impress me. I want to be given good news.
Well, there is good news, Jack, but it's a little bit in the offing, I think. I think the good news from the mining industry's point of view is that Premier Van der Zan and Mines Minister Jack Davis have appointed or asked the industry to appoint a task force to have a very serious look at the problems of the industry and to make recommendations to them as to perhaps ways we can improve the situation.
Couldn't you and I sit down right now and make the recommendations that you want in the mining industry?
I think, Jack, recommendations and suggestions have been made for a number of years by different associations to the government, different associations related to mining. But this time we have all sectors of the mining industry, the exploration-oriented people, the coal people, and the metal mining people coming together to try to come to government with a unified series of recommendations that look at the whole gamut of things relating to mining.
But is it not a fact that almost anybody can tell me or you that the royalty and mineral land tax payments in the province of British Columbia are crippling and make it very difficult for the industry to have any decent economic health at all?
Well, Jack, those items, there is a coal royalty and there is a mineral land tax, but there are a number of things that, a number of government charges, a number of government taxes, and perhaps physical things that government can or cannot do that affect the industry. It's not quite that simple. People in the mining industry are certainly not adverse to paying taxes when they make a profit. And what we have to do is make British Columbia an attractive place to invest in mining so that profit can be made so that we will have that industry around for a while.
In other words, reduce the royalties, make power a little bit cheaper, subsidize transportation in the BC Rail.
The mining industry is not looking for subsidies, Jack. We can stand on our own given half a chance.
But you're looking for a cut in the government take.
That's right. Of the earnings of the mining industry over the last 10 years, roughly 63%, and I say 63% of the earnings have flowed back to government in one charge or another.
How many jobs do we have in the coal fields now at all? I mean, I know that the public has put an awful lot of money into Northeast coal, something like $1 billion in infrastructure, right? Between the federal and provincial governments.
Well, yes, infrastructure, I guess, is a responsibility of government, and considerable investment has been made there, as it has throughout British Columbia.
Are we making any money on Northeast
coal?
Well,
the coal industry last year, the coal industry as such, made a profit of $10 million. Now, that was more than offset by a $45 million loss by the metal mining industry in British Columbia, which is where we get this net loss business of $35 million for the mining industry as a whole. Coal is very competitive, it's very tough, but it's a different type of a product than metals. And the coal industry is struggling. It has to be very conscious of its cost, and it has to compete with other areas in the world which have the same quality coal and perhaps are a little bit closer to market and have a better climate for investment and operating than we do in British Columbia.
Surely the only metal that anybody really wants now in any quantity at all is gold.
Well, Jack, there still is a demand in the world for all of our base metals. The growth of those demands is certainly flattened off, and in fact is almost non-existent, but we will always need copper, molybdenum, lead, zinc, iron, etc.
Up to a point.
Well, we will always need at least as much as we have now, but the demand has slackened off. There's a lot of capacity in the world, so what happens is that the person who can produce a product for the least cost will be the one who's around the longest. And that's what we want to be.
When I look at the mess we are in the forest industry in British Columbia,
I didn't do it, Jack.
You're an expert in the mess. But when I look at the mess, I think, well, there's not a mention in this task force report here of labor or unions. No. Have you got a member of the union on your task force?
No, we don't, Jack. The terms of reference to the task force is provided by the government were the way to look at those economic factors that affect the industry. And
surely wages are one of the economic factors.
But I think the relationship between employers and employees in the mining industry have been good. The employers, the organized labor and unorganized in the mining sector, have been responsible, and they have, in many cases, agreed to reductions or holding their own in terms of wages, and have done a fair bit to make sure that their industry survives. So the terms of reference did not include labor matters.
You don't have the same problems the forest industry has in terms of flexibility or
well, the mining industry is quite different. Negotiations in that industry are done on a mine-by-mine basis, not on an industry-wide basis, and not even on a company-wide basis if there is more than one mine operated by a company.
Is there any exploration going on in BC at all just now?
Yes, Jack. There is, this last couple of years since this so-called flow-through share financing has taken place, has encouraged the exploration for metals, primarily gold and silver in Canada. I don't think we're getting our share of that type of exploration dollars, but some is taking place, and we've had a fairly active exploration business in the last few years because of that type of financing.
What do you want the public to do in relation to your task force? Is there anything you want to tell people, or is this really just an in-house task force?
Well, Jack, the mining industry is extremely important to the people of British Columbia, as you well know.
Mm-hmm.
We employ directly, including the exploration and the Alcan smelter, about 21,000 people. And you know what the multiplier effect is in basic industries. The mining industry is responsible for the employment of over 70,000 people in BC. That's a lot of families. And we can, you know, we can improve that situation. We can have more mines. Well, we can continue to have mines shutting down without replacing them. So
are you going to have hearings around in places like Catsiar, Stewart, Grand Isle?
No, we're not.
Kimberley, Fernie, Sparwood Trail?
All of these places you mentioned, Jack, are of course rather dependent upon the mining industry. But no, our form of operating this task force is not to have hearings. We really don't have time. We have to have a report in to the government by the end of January, and hopefully the recommendations that we make, some of them will be taken up on by government, and they're going to have to get that type of thing ready for perhaps the next legislative session. So we have to move quickly, and we hope that the government will move quickly too.
Hey, did you like that business of Teck buying out Cominco?
Well, you know, Jack,
I noticed the CPR stock went up, but Teck stock didn't move to begin with.
I think it's probably a good thing to have the control of that major portion of British Columbia's mining industry, have its headquarters here in British Columbia.
In BC.
And I think, you know, Cominco has been a long-standing company in British Columbia. They have a pretty good corporate citizenship record, but they are controlled from abroad, or, you know, abroad by meaning the eastern part of the country. And I think it's good that that headquarters is here. Teck is a very aggressive company and understands the situation in British Columbia.
Now, you have been listening to Tom Waterland. Don't you miss the reins of power?
What reins is that, Jack? There was different things that were reigning.
Remember all the kerfuffles you had?
No.
I mean, now you got no conflicts. You're out and clear.
That's right, Jack. I
but you were
enjoyed it.
forest minister. Think of how you could have solved this whole lumber thing in a flash.
I did solve it, Jack, back in 1983, but it got all messed up again.
Yeah, the countervail was won in 1983.
Yes, it was a different situation then, though. At that time, the situation was 90% fact and 10% politics. I think that's reversed this time.
Now it's 90% politics and 10% fact.
Different kettle of fish.
Okay, I'm going to the phones. I don't think that you've anything to talk to Tom Waterland about on the phones. We'll have a free-for-all on the phones, and Tom will drink his coffee in case by any chance you want to talk about mining. Somebody might. Anything else, though, is... I haven't had a chance to look at great detail at the Bank of BC deal, but it seems not bad on the face of it. Couple of $100 million to Hong Kong Bank to recapitalize it, help them take it over, and they take over all the assets and liabilities. Bank of BC name stays alive for a minimum of 2 years. And deposits guaranteed 100% by the entire Hong Kong Bank group. It's a good deal on the face of it. Don't know all the details yet. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yep.
Hello, I'd like to ask Mr. Waterland if the terms of a study for his commission include looking into the degree of regulation in the industry. There's so much overlap between departments.
Okay,
whether that's going to be one of the recommendations they might come forward with.
Well, we're looking at all of those regulatory processes that affect the industry, and yes, we'd like to see some of them streamlined. there's always been a desire on the part of people in the industry to have one window to government.
Yeah, I'm an engineering student out at UBC in the mining department, and I just like to express our thanks for the support that the Mining Association has provided the department.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mustn't give you a plug.
Why not, Jim?
Goes against the grain. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Waterland?
Yes.
This is not a question about engineering. It's just to let you know that 2 years ago, you helped my husband and I on a very dusty road in the back of Lillooet. Not only did you help us, but you towed us into town and helped us find a motel. I didn't know you were an MLA. We both felt very sorry when all that nonsense hit about you, and I think you're going to be missed as a politician. Thank you again.
Well, thank you very much. I remember that dusty trip, and I didn't feel too happy for your husband sitting in that little car behind the pickup with the dust flowing past him.
This is terrible. Two calls praising Tom. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
Mr. Waterland.
Yes, sir.
Gallium arsenide. It's probably one of the purest metals that Cameco makes. Is the task force looking into this at all?
Well, the task force isn't really looking into the products produced. What we're doing is trying to look at the investment climate for the industry. Cameco this is one of the sort of space age products, and that's something.
What's it called?
Gallium arsenide.
Gallium arsenide.
Yes.
It's only grown in 3 places in the world that do grow it like that.
And you know
grow, as you say?
Yeah, it's a crystal that they grow.
They grow gallium arsenide. What do they use it for?
For silicon wafers, and it's for transmitting in computers.
Jack, it's one of the things that we have to do as an industry is broaden the types of products that we produce. And
fair enough. I'll keep my eyes open for some gallium arsenide. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, Jack.
Good evening.
Mr. Waterland. My comment was on that Hong Kong Bank of Canada you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know too much more than just what I've heard in the TV and the papers. But I think with the Hong Kong Bank, it sounds like a good idea because this might really coincide with this trade center at the airport.
I think that's the plan.
Pacific Rim. I mean, we've really got to look into different trade nations too now, because the United States, we can't totally depend on them.
No.
And I think maybe this is a good chance. I think Van der Zand might be right.
I
don't think giving it to Van City, I mean, it's just piddly stuff. We really can't build some kind of a, what do they say, clout. You know what I mean?
On a credit union.
Like I say, I'm not really up on the whole facts of the matter, but it sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like a good one to me too, and I think it's no great news for the shareholders, mind you, because the shareholders won't know what's going to happen till long after December the 12th, and I should imagine they won't be worth very much in the way of shares. But on Kaiser and the boys who raised that $66 million are going to take a bath, quite obviously, I should imagine. But the stock is not trading now until after they file some papers around about the 12th of December. Go ahead, please.
Yes, question on flow-through financing, if I may, taking into account the fact that the province of Quebec, for about the last 3 years running, has had more exploration in that province than all of the rest of Canada put together because of their additional 33.33% write-off at the provincial level to enhance the federal 133.5. In other words, in Quebec, there's 166.2% write-off in a flow-through. Is the industry in BC and the BC government, and will representations by your group to them recommend that something like that be done in the province of BC to enhance mineral exploration? Also, another question,
leave
is
that
the
one for
industry-wide, Canada-wide, doing anything in the way of research to find new uses for base metals?
2 questions. What about the flow-through?
Okay, the flow-through share thing, it's quite right that Quebec has a 166% write-off in effect, but they also have a higher level of provincial income tax, so in order to come out even, they need that. I think as important as that difference between us and Quebec is the other factors, the cost of doing business and what happens when you do find a mine in British Columbia. We have to improve that climate. This gentleman is quite right that a lot of the money is going to the province of Quebec because they are creating a climate and trying to entice the industry into the province and make things very attractive there.
Go ahead, please, from Smithers.
Yes, Mr. Webster, my comments go back to last week's show when you had the program on the First Minister's meeting with the Prime Minister. I just wanted to mention my concern about a lot of the callers were for Western separatism, and those comments concern me greatly as a Canadian. I just wanted to say, especially in regards to the one who made the comment that the only way that we in Western Canada will get equity is to break the backs of the Eastern Canadian provinces. My concern is I feel that's quite wrong, and what we need to do, the only way we'll get cooperation in Canada is to communicate with the East. And I, as a Canadian, just wanted to make the comment that...
Good for you.
Okay,
Thank you very much indeed. So what's the Liberal Leadership Convention in Ottawa this weekend? That should be jolly. I predict that Turner will make it, but I don't know if he'll make it by 66%, which I reckon is what he needs, don't you?
Well, I think the Prime Minister is hoping he makes it too.
That's a snarky political... Of course, I forgot you're a social
I can say what I want
That's
now,
right.
Jack.
You're still a social creditor.
I'm not a politician anymore.
Are you still a membership
My
in the
political
Social
beliefs
Credit Party?
are my business, Mr. Webster.
Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Yes, hello.
Yeah.
I would like to know why we are paying a subsidy on coal that is going to Japan.
Well, I'm not aware of any subsidy that we're paying on coal going to Japan.
Well, unless you take in the cost of all the facilities which were built for the Japanese coal traffic, and the fact that we don't pay a straight-up subsidy on it.
Well, I believe that it was about $30 a long ton.
Well, that may be calculated into the cost of the facilities, but we don't admit to that, do we?
Well, Jack, are we objecting to paying a subsidy on the movement of grain? The national government subsidize both the Pacific CPR and the Canadian National Railway, which is owned by government. I think government has some responsibility to provide the transportation infrastructure to get our products to market.
Is there a big subsidy on the movement of coal?
No, there's, as a matter of fact, the coal coming out of the Northeast, Jack, has a surcharge just for the purpose of helping to defray the cost of that spur line. Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Waterland.
Sir.
What about the steel production in the province? All our high-tension towers throughout BC are stamped with Made in Japan. Why aren't they stamped with Made in BC or Made in Ontario, Made in Canada by Stelco?
Well, we don't have a steel industry in British Columbia, and I'm sure that BC Hydro likes to buy its steel where it can get the best price for it. As a matter of fact, I think the balance of payment we have with Japan, they make their steel from our British Columbia metallurgical coal, or the coal is used in the process, and they buy an awful lot. Japan is our most important customer in terms of mineral products from this province.
So you say it's quite logical to buy Japanese steel in British Columbia?
This hatred against the Ontario government is unforgivable, for God's sake.
I don't hate the Ontario government. I like to get the best deal we can for all of Canada. We have to buy from other countries if we expect them to buy from us.
I think you made not a bad case, Tom, to buy Japanese steel.
Right.
Although, mind you, I'd like to export BC coal to Ontario, and then we might buy some Ontario steel. Well, Van der Zam's trying to do it now, and he's talking about that?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack. Mr. Waterland answered my question a little while ago. You asked him if there was any union members on his task force.
And he said
no.
no.
He answered the question by saying, no, this is strictly for investments. The task force was for.
Right.
For the climate for mining in British Columbia.
Okay, bye. 6. Go ahead, please.
Hello, is that me?
Oh, it's you, but I'm sorry. I can't continue the conversation because Buddy's giving me all of these signals. Well, you stayed longer than I planned, Tom, but you were quite right.
Oh, thank you, Jack. You're very
My
kind.
thanks to Tom Waterland. I'll be back after the break. A listener sent it. It was such a good likeness of me that I had to show it to you. I'm not going to eat it. I promise you. Other people will. It's slipping off. I'll see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. precisely.